Hi, Clarissa Mosley, psychologist and psychotherapist, back to you with some more on Baby Reindeer. Today we're going to look at episode 4 and explore the concepts of psychopathy, sociopathy, and the Dark Tetrad. I struggled to make this video. I procrastinated. Engaging with this material, even having to watch the episode again, was difficult. If you've watched episode 4, then you know what it contains. I won't be showing any detailed recounts of the scenes and the footage that might be triggering. Suffice to say, I think Darrien's character would have been either a psychopath or certainly has features of the Dark Tetrad. So let's understand what we mean by these terms. So for a start, sociopath and psychopath are drastically interchanged on the internet. In fact, there are some pretty top psychological pages and people that will use the criteria for sociopathy inverse with psychopathy all the time. But I've dug deep and I've found what the distinction is, and it's kind of important. So basically, even as I talk of psychopathy and sociopathy, these are not diagnosable disorders, believe it or not. The only thing that is actually diagnosable, according to the DSM-5, something close to sociopath, which is antisocial personality disorder. So people that have got antisocial personality disorder, they fail to obey the rules, they disregard laws, and really the impact on society. They are effectively antisocial. This does not mean that they do not want to be in society. Sociopaths do want to be around people, but they cannot control their violent or aggressive or sociopathic impulses around people. So antisocial personality disorder is the closest thing we have to explaining sociopathy. They lie, they break laws, they are deceitful, they are manipulative of other people, they have a pattern of this behavior, and they lack remorse. So that's antisocial personality disorder. That's all that can be diagnosed, but it pretty much describes a sociopath. So antisocial personality disorder or sociopaths fill up the prisons because they are impulsive and aggressive and don't care about consequences and seldom experience any remorse. That means they're not going to be too concerned about lashing out, doing something dangerous, illegal, hurting other people. It's just going to happen. And they often do end up in prison because they're sloppy, they're impulsive, they're all over the shop. So that's what I would call a sociopath. They lack empathy in the sense that they don't really care about the effect of what they're doing on others. They're not really good at establishing close interpersonal relationships. Psychopaths will also not experience any guilt, remorse, or shame for the effect of their potentially shitty behavior towards others. Now, let's get it straight. Not all sociopaths and not all psychopaths are mass murderers, serial killers, or even necessarily dangerous. Although I would say that if you do cross a true sociopath, you are far more likely to get hurt or in trouble or attacked than you are by a psychopath. If you want to put a sociopath in a uniform, it's probably an orange tracksuit. If you want to put a psychopath in a uniform, it will be a suit and a tie, potentially a designer suit and a tie. Psychopaths have been well researched to be occupying positions of power. They are CEOs, they are surgeons, they run corporations, they run states, and they run countries. I mentioned that not all psychopaths are dangerous per se. Although a psychopath running a corporation that is exploiting cheap labour in third world countries, we could basically posit an argument there that they are dangerous. They're certainly exploitative. They really have zero feelings for the concerns and effect of whatever it is that they want on others. Psychopaths are a lot more cool. They're a lot more callous. Or actually, both of them are callous. They're a lot more calculated. So if we want to use the serial killer or the murderer example, a sociopath is more likely to explode at the moment, let out a rain of bullets onto a crowd because they've just been really aggravated or have a vengeance. They're just angry, like violent, explosive temper is more likely to be seen in a sociopath, aka antisocial personality disorder. Psychopaths are a lot more calculating. If it were in a psychopath's mind that they wanted to take out vengeance against a person, a subgroup, just maybe for their own cold grandiosity, they would do it in a very cool, calculated way, and they're far more likely to make it look like an accident. If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like and subscribe to hear more down the track. So if a psychopath is going to take a risk like hurting someone or destroying someone, they're going to do it in a very cool, calculated way. Both psychopaths and sociopaths fail to form solid relationships, experience empathy, guilt, or remorse. They're both exploitative and manipulative. They're both insensitive to punishment. They're both arrogant, and they both have difficulty processing the emotions of others. So the question on all of your minds is, well, we all know that insufficient or traumatic child rearing can create people that are damaged in some way. Sociopaths or psychopaths are a product of an abusive childhood. The answer is sociopaths are far more likely to have lived a childhood that was neglectful, abusive, violent. So we can sort of say that sociopaths are more likely to be created by their environment. They may have a predisposition, but, the lack of empathy and the criminal mindedness or the impulsivity can also have underlying brain structures or brain damaged areas. And if you think about child abuse and a child getting hit around the head frequently, living in a really brutal environment, you can see the conditions ripe for the development of sociopathy. Psychopaths, on the other hand, have been researched and their brains have been scanned, and there are several brain differences. There are several neurological differences in the structure of their brains, the way they process emotions, the areas that light up when they view violence and other people getting hurt. Rather than having a fear reaction, they actually have an excitement reaction. So not all psychopaths will enjoy seeing other people getting hurt or be thrill seekers or like extreme violence, but many could. Not going to be as sensitive on any metric as a regular person with well-developed empathy would be, for example. So there are definite differences in the psychopath's brain. So what is the Dark Tetrad? The Dark Tetrad used to be called the Dark Triad. It's basically a cluster of now 4 different personality or characteristics and behaviors that are subclinical. So they're not clinically diagnosable as any other psychiatric disorder, nor are they diagnosable as having antisocial personality disorder, although they may have the feature of psychopathy in the mix. So the sort of cold, calculating way of being, which isn't quite psychopathic, but it almost is. The Dark Tetrad also contains Machiavellianism. So Machiavellianism is basically the willingness to exploit others for their own personal gain. The third aspect of the Dark Tetrad is narcissism. So Dark Tetrad personalities have got elements of grandiosity, arrogance, their own personal ego is what's important in the situation. And the 4th edition that wasn't there with the Dark Triad, that used to be Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, the addition was sadism. What researchers have found is that if people have got these 3 personality traits, they are also likely to be sadistic. So sadists delight in the pain and suffering in others, be this psychological, emotional, or physical. They enjoy making others suffer, and they enjoy inflicting pain or seeing pain be inflicted onto others. I think Darrien, the character that is portrayed as Darrien, the Darrien character, is either a psychopath, but certainly he is a Dark Tetrad character. So obviously the Dark Tetrad has the psychopathy involved in it at a subclinical level, but it has that Machiavellianism, and we can see how Darrien willfully manipulated Donny to have his own needs met. Darrien exploited him. He made promises to him that he was never going to meet. He was leading him along a garden path, and it was so sadistic even in that regard because he manipulated and groomed Donny. He led him to believe and got so much trust out of Donny, built up his hope, took him on this journey. And you can tell in the scene where Darrien's looking at Donny's manuscript that he doesn't, it's kind of crap, right? Even the storyline is crap. So he was deliberately leading him along, and then he was giving him drugs that could have killed him. The cocktail of GBH and MDMA could have knocked him out. It could have killed him. All of those drugs could have killed Donny, and Darrien simply didn't care. He wanted power over him. Now these characters, Dark Tetrad, so he was definitely Machiavellianist. He definitely wanted to exploit Donny for his own agenda. He definitely had elements of psychopathy. He was cold. He didn't care. And you could tell by the stillness in him. Psychopaths have got a certain 1,000-mile stare. It's kind of like a dead-eyed stare. That's very characteristic of the coldness that exists within the psychopath. They are not flinching emotionally. He also had narcissism. We can see it perfectly in the scene where he's bragging about how spiritual he is. And
there wouldn't be celebrities. There'd be leaders, gurus, spiritually awake. Either that or me around each place.
6 of you at one party. Jesus, I couldn't imagine how many drugs there'd be.
He's really elevating himself above and beyond as some enlightened spiritual being, which is such the opposite of what he actually is and what he does. He is more like the devil. He is more evil than could have even been articulated. So there are a lot of these characters in Hollywood, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Jimmy Savilles. As mentioned, you're far more likely to see a psychopath wearing a business suit. Unfortunately, these characters are everywhere, and they don't get exposed and outed when they should. If you look at the cunning manipulation that Darrien had over Donny, Darrien promised Donny the world. He promised to make him a star. For every woman that's been on the casting couch, this kind of behavior is not, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. People in positions of power that are psychopathic or Dark Tetrad that want to use, abuse, and exploit others can and do. And sadly, they do it over and over again. So Donny was promised stardom, he was promised the world, and what he was given was he was just broken. His trust, his hope, his dreams, and his self-esteem and his self-respect were all completely destroyed. Now, if that isn't psychopathic and sadistic and Machiavellianist and narcissistically oriented, I don't know what is. I'm not messing around with this one. I'm really completely horrified and disgusted. So why did Darrien want to drug Donny? People ask, why didn't he just go out to a gay bar? He could have afforded a rent boy. He could have had his jollies with someone who was consensual. But he didn't. He wanted to exploit. He wanted power. And he also wanted his victim unconscious. So this is an aberrant sexual paraphilia, perversion in the old terminology, called somnophilia. And somnophiliacs are twisted to the extent that they want to abuse or sexually assault someone who is unconscious or asleep. Now, obviously, they are sexually assaulting and abusing them because when somebody is asleep or unconscious, they cannot consent. So this is not, unfortunately, an unusual behavior that somebody would take complete advantage and assault, that they would sexually assault someone when they were completely unconscious. The sickness of this just blows my mind. When somebody is that unconscious, if they've fallen unconscious drunk or because of drugs, they could die. And how creepy is someone that they literally genuinely want to have sex with someone who is almost a corpse, who is completely unconscious. Now, obviously, we can see the perversion in this. It's a philia. It's not a regular sexual desire. It's not consensual. It's not intimate. It's not connectful. It is using the other as an object, and an object that they care so little about. It doesn't matter if they die. It doesn't matter that they consent. And the power in that action, the perverse, dark power of being able to completely just use someone however you want when they're completely unconscious, it makes me vomit in the back of my mouth. However, it is probably one of the more common pornographic themes that can be found out there on pornography sites. It's not as aberrant as it should be. So this, I think, is why a lot of people aren't really lathering up over the Darrien story, because it's so dark, seedy, and disgusting. But the problem is Darrien is so calculated, so contained, so cool. He's the epitome of evil. Really, people like that are actually evil. Martha might be batty, she might be unhinged, she might be dangerous, and she might be mean, bad. Martha, the character, compared to Darrien, I don't see too much of a comparison. Darrien deliberately groomed Donny and really abused him in the most heartless, horrible, sick way. If you've got any different opinions or any questions that you'd like to ask me, please drop them in the comments below. And while you're there, hit me a like if you feel that way inclined. So I think the message here is that we can't turn away from the true darkness that exists, although we have to admit that we don't want to look at it. We don't want to look at everyday sadism. We don't want to look at the fact that people, particularly women, get drugged and raped all the time, and that the reality of male-to-male violence and abuse is real and very, very, very much in the shadows. So I think there's an incredible amount of shame for men to admit to themselves, let alone somebody else, that they have been victimized in this way. I think if we can alchemize our trauma, like everybody has got trauma to some degree, and usually trauma is caused by the narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic, dark tetrad, antisocial characters that really don't care about the effect that they can have on so many other people. And then the people who have experienced the abuse, the harm, the hurt, the violence, the assault, are the ones that actually have to deal with it and repair it, and if they can repair it, and alchemize it. And I say alchemize because we don't really want to say, oh, if you've had trauma, you can make good of it. It's never ideal to have this kind of trauma, any kind of trauma in your life, but it happens. And if we can work it through to an extent where it can be alchemized or transformed. So Baby Reindeer, I feel, is Donny's transformation, alchemization of his trauma. He gets to tell his story. There's a catharsis that happens in the retelling. There is a release that happens in the disclosure. For anyone, as a therapist, I have this experience with clients frequently where they may tell me something that they have kept locked inside their entire lives. And it is a release of pressure from within them. It may not make that trauma ever go away, but it certainly helps to process it, to do what can be done with it, because trauma is never digestible and it's never good and it's never ideal. But there is this thing called post-traumatic growth, where if the trauma is dealt with in a positive, tender, cathartic, alchemizing way, if that's possible, then there can be growth after the trauma, depending on the extent, the gravity, the age, the conditions, and all of the above. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a heavy episode. It was a difficult video to make, but I hope you've learned something about sociopathy, psychopathy, the Dark Tetrad, and the other absurdities and perversions and aberrations that can happen to humans and are unfortunately a little bit more common than we would like them to be. I think, again, it's really important that we don't turn away from these dark characters, because it's turning away that lets evil endure. All that evil needs to prevail is for good men to do nothing. And so if we do nothing about the evil that is happening all the time, and if we want to pretend that it doesn't exist, then we are allowing it to continue to exist. So that's my mic drop for today. If you enjoyed this, give me a like. If you want to hear more that I 100% guarantee you will be lighter than this today, then please hit subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.